This is For the Governed, a podcast series brought to you by Athalonz. Here are your hosts, Tim Markison and Ron Cates.
Welcome to another exciting Athalonz podcast. With me today, as always, is Tim Markison, the CEO and founder of Athalonz. Now, I've been on board here at Athalonz, handling the marketing for 2 years now. And like you, Tim, I've got a lot of work experience. Some of the jobs were incredibly fun. Some of them were absolutely miserable. This has been a delight. I really like how things work here, the environment, how people communicate with each other. And I know a lot of that is because of the 4 rules that you've kind of put into place. So I was hoping in this podcast, we could talk about those and you could help expand on those some a little bit. Now, I know the first one is the golden rule, which everybody kind of knows, treat people the way that you want them to treat you. But tell me how you manifest that here at Athalonz.
Yeah. So let me just start with, how I came up with my set of 4 rules. You mentioned, we've been around for a while. So I've worked for 32 years as a patent attorney. And essentially my job is the same. I write patents, I prosecute the patents with the patent office, and I help my clients leverage those for their advantage in their business. The environment in which I do that job has varied dramatically, taking the job from it's awful to great and anywhere in between. So, what I've learned is, how to create, or what I'm experimenting with and what I like is why I came up with these 4 rules. So the first one, like you mentioned, is the golden rule. Treat others as you would like them to treat you. And it seems so obvious, and yet if that's not on the forefront of people's minds and reminded, it's easy to slip away from that. Especially in an environment where we are competitive. In a business setting, we're competing with others for market share, and then within an organization, competing for spots, for raises, things like that. So it's easy to slip from staying in our higher self and treating others like we would be treated and get into that ego competitive phase.
Well, here, especially when it comes to customer service, I think we've done a really good job of adopting this rule, because sometimes customers have a request that's not incredibly reasonable, shall we say?
Yep, that's a fair way to put it.
But our attitude is always, well, if that was you, what would you want? And so I think our basic goal is always to make them happy according to their definition. So whatever it would take to make them happy, that's what we'll do, because why not? That's part of the golden rule and how it affects our customer service.
It's important that we respect the feelings of others and acknowledge them, which is what is part of the golden rule. So with respect to our customers, we want to acknowledge what they're feeling and see what we can do to make them feel better about their relationship with Athalonz.
Yeah, I think we always try to see it from their point of view.
Yes.
The next rule is, this one's long, before picking the splinter out of someone else's eye, make sure the log is out of yours. I know what that means because I've been around you for a while, but can you explain to our audience what you're going after there?
Yeah, so that's actually a quote out of the New Testament from one of Jesus's teachings, but it just really resonated with me, and it's to me, how I interpret that is, before I pick on somebody else, make sure my house is clean. So with respect to finding fault in something that happened, make sure that I did all the things that I could do, and I own the things that I did or could have done better before blaming others, is really how I interpret that. And again, it's like the golden rule. It's easy to understand. It's difficult to implement time in and time out unless it's in the forefront of your mind and you really practice that.
In a previous episode, we talked about, for a long time, your mindset was you would really pick on yourself a lot, way harsher than how you would deal with other people. This kind of fits under that as well. To treat yourself better, you have to say, well, would I be all over this person for that minor mistake the way I am all over myself right now? Yeah. The answer is no. So you were able to make some adjustments that way.
Yeah, actually, that was going to be a topic of a whole nother blog of, it's for me, it's easier to apply the 4 rules to others than to myself. And I'm working on that, from the issues that I struggle with from, the abuse that I suffered as a child, and we've talked about that as well.
The next one we've heard before: give a person a fish, they're fed for a day. Teach them how to fish, and they're fed for a lifetime.
Yeah. So, how I interpret that in the workplace is, what kind of management style is there? Is it micromanagement? Is it, way too open loop? So to me, I interpret that from an environment standpoint where I want all the people here to feel empowered within their domain to do what they need to do, and give them the tools and the education and training that they need so they can execute their job freely. And to the point where they're willing to expand and try things, and not afraid to make a mistake because of the other two rules. That, the worst thing that can happen to me is people get so afraid of doing anything, they get paralyzed and they'll do just the bare minimum. So to me, that's like giving somebody a fish for the day, where they have to be told every day what they need to do because they're too afraid to make a mistake. So if we empower them to do what they do, well, now they've fed themselves.
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty amazing team, but a lot of that is because of the empowerment, where I think everybody feels like they're the CEO of Athalonz that works here. And I mean that in the best of ways, and that they really look out for every aspect of the business. There's a lot of autonomy. It's not unsupervised, but there is a lot of autonomy to try new things and to experiment and to think out of the box quite a bit.
Yep. And that's by design. So, we have our lanes that we need to operate in, and there's some overlap between the lanes. There has to be, otherwise we have gaps in what we're trying to fill. So every once in a while it's like, okay, we're a little course correction for all of us, but it's all done again in accordance to these rules. So it's constructive feedback, constructive criticism, so that we all feel better about what we're doing. And the clarity of boundaries really help. It's like, okay, you're kind of drifting over here. Let's bring you back here. And here's why. And it empowers them to, focus more on their own area.
Yeah, I think it's the here's why that makes a huge difference. It's kind of the way I raised my kids. I didn't say, no, you can't do that. So here's the reason that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, and not that we're kids here, but the principle still applies. So not only do I learn from that, if you say, here's why that's not a great idea, not only does it apply to that specific situation, but I can extrapolate from that into other situations without needing that guidance anymore.
Yeah. I think that's a great analogy with being a father to children. I mean, it's clearly a different relationship, employee and employer, but it's still human dynamics. So how can you effectively communicate so that we're building each other up as opposed to tearing each other down?
The fourth one is communication is a two-way street that requires active listening. This
is something that I learned actually through marriage counseling that my wife and I did. It's so easy, for me, when we were in a conversation, my mind would drift. So I wasn't actually really paying attention, or I was starting to already come up with my responses in my head as to, well, why I'm justified in what I did with respect to what she's saying. So by putting those preconceived processes away and just really listening to what she was saying, and then, not parroting back, but saying, okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, this is what you're saying, and this is the reason for it. And then now you've got a concrete point to work from in the communication. And it's creating something where we're building each other up, as opposed to tearing each other down or getting very defensive. So that's part of the active listening, is I'm paying attention to what you're saying, and then at least to some degree I'm saying, okay, so this is what I understand you said, and okay, let's start working from there. And it's challenging to do that, again, day in and day out.
Well, it's interactive, nonstop, so that makes the person know that they're being listened to. It also makes sure that what you're saying is being interpreted correctly along the way. What I have found is that because some people are not used to that, you almost have to draw it out of them.
Yep.
You know, so what do you think? You know, like a lot of times I'll have to stop and pause and say, okay, so what do you think about that? Where the person would otherwise just be quiet, but I'll have to stop what I'm saying to make sure I get their input and their feelings about what I just said before progressing. And that way, make sure we're truly all on the same page, not just saying we're on the same page or, yeah, I heard you or okay, but they really get the point behind what I was saying.
Yep. And I think when you take into account the other 3 rules, you know, in a group setting, it's very easy to shrink and not say what you think or feel. Or you've got the other way where you get over dramatic and stuff like that. So, you know, with the active communication, it being a two-way street in view with the other rules, now we can have a really good dialogue from different perspectives and really come up with the right solutions for the issues that we're facing at the time.
I have found this to work really, really well, not just dealing with customers and suppliers, but, you know, also the team here at Athalonz. It's just been an amazing work environment. I strongly recommend people try some of these and see how it works for you in your workplace or in your personal life.